Debbie and Kent D. from Concord, California.
Hi, everybody. I'm Debbie Davis, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Debbie.
And I'm Kent Davis, and I'm an alcoholic.
Before we get started, there is a young man here, Saul. Is Saul in the room with 2 years sober today? Is there anybody else with an AA birthday today? Holly?
17 years.
Today. Happy birthday, Holly. Anybody else? Well, I think that deserves a song.
This was not part of the script, by the way.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you, Alkies. Happy birthday to you. We can take that out of my time. That's right.
That's agreed.
So I want to thank the committee, Kent, for asking me to participate in this. All of us have a desire to have a mate. And I know that was part of my journey. It wasn't necessary, but it's a natural human desire for most people. And oddly enough, today, 17 years ago today, Kent and I left Long Beach. I lived in Long Beach. We packed me up and left Long Beach to move up to Concord. I moved up here 17 years ago today, so it's interesting how that timing worked out.
We're still together.
And we're still together. Yeah. And so we're going to share a little bit about the steps in our life, because this is about the 3 legacies in our life. And we're going to share experiences about the traditions and the concepts and how we use them in our relationship. We will have a break. So anyway, we're going to just go ahead and get started. So to give you a little run-up on how I met Kent in that past, our family life is very different. I was raised up in the Midwest with really good, hardworking parents. I was an only child, doted on, self-centered, selfishness. That was born within myself, but it also was something that I exacerbated once I started drinking. And on into adult life was the selfishness and self-centeredness and self-serving. And with that, about 12, 13 years old, my parents would separate and divorce. And I would start drinking at 12. At 17 and a half years old, due to my drinking and behavior and so forth, I was put into a treatment program for alcoholism and drug addiction. I would eventually get sober about 10 months later and claim that as my sobriety date then and today, which is February the 8th, 1976, which means I've been with you for over 41 years. So I'm 18 years old when I get sober, and I would say I grew up in many, many ways in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I did not know about having a relationship. I knew a lot. My drinking behavior with men was like a gajillion times worse than I ever did drunk. I wish I could say, oh, well, I was drunk. No, I can't. was, I guess, you go to a meeting probably, and then maybe you go to a movie, and then what do? You got to know each other, I guess you could say, and sex
And
was
breakfast.
as about emotional as a cup of coffee. So I didn't have a connection with that part of a relationship with someone. I'm 18 years old, I'm young, and you know what happens when you're 18 and 20 and 22 when things are happening in your life. And those early years, I'm not proud of this. It's just what I did, again, because I didn't want any commitment and so forth. I dated a lot of married men. I wasn't married, so it was not a problem to me. But they were, and I mainly did that because I didn't want commitment. I just wanted to have fun. And that was provided. And I decided, I was 4 years sober when I moved to Atlanta. The next couple of years, I had fallen into that rut of complacency that I didn't even know, and at 6 years sober, I decide that people, places, and things are gonna make me happy. It's really called Men, Money, and Mansions are gonna make me happy. And I met a little fella a few weeks after that, and he had all the qualifications I was looking for. I knew I'd fall in love with him eventually, but right now, we got our priorities in line here, and I was in this whirlwind romance for, of course, I was the only one involved, but I was in it, and this little fella, he married somebody else, and so I let him go, and I moved on to something else and did this dance of delusion for 3 months, and he married somebody else. And so at 6.9 years of sobriety, I came crashing into I never left you, but I got serious about recovery from alcoholism. And it was been kind of, I can't remember who really kind of mentioned it over the weekend so far, but there was February 76 was the surrender to substances and so forth, but this became surrender to alcoholism in a new way. It was in a very different view of things. And when I took those steps again, I had looked at how I'd been behaving, and I knew I wanted a different way of life. I was doing a lot of drunk behavior, physically sober, and not proud of that kind of an example. So I began to live a different way of life. A few years later, I would get married. I'd move to Southern California, and that relationship would come to an end after 5 years and 9 months. And I took those steps again on that particular subject, and I saw in the inventory process that I knew zipperino about being in a relationship, because selfishness, self-serving, and self-centeredness doesn't have a lot of mileage on it. And if I'm all about me and what they can do for me and how it's going to affect me. And so I really took a good look at that. And part of the inventory process that I hadn't seen before was, now I'm 17-ish years sober around that time, was about the paragraphs that follow that sex inventory is about shaping your sane and sound ideal for a future sex life, or in my words, a future relationship. And that I saw that if you really do, God, have something different in store for me, right now, I don't have much to bring to the table. I'm a great servant in AA. I'm a great member of AA in my home group. I'm active in sponsorship, but this area is pretty weak. And I want to do things differently. And I looked at the people who I saw what I felt were successful relationships and what did they do. And I there's about 5 million books on relationships or how-to manuals, relationships for dummies. I mean, there's all kinds of helpful literature, but like a lot of things, the literature's only as good as the action it recommends that you do, and as that's going to change something. So what happened is I just picked a couple of things, not AA-produced literature, and they were tremendous help to me in rearranging and actions, giving me new actions to take. And so at that point, that's when I sort of realized one of them was talking about the seasons of a relationship. And I'd heard about them, but I never knew what they were, and it described it. And the first season was the perfect season. You know, even when they burp, they're cute. You know, it's just so, look, isn't that precious? And then it bugs the crap out of you the second season. And then the third season is you're going to have problems. And the fourth is conflict or problem resolution. And this is the snapshot of it, is that if you can get through those 4 seasons, you probably got a shot at a relationship or ongoing, because you've been able to probably handle things like an adult if you've had, you know, good conflict resolution, because it's going to happen. You got 2 people, 2 egos, 2 sets of emotions, and they can come into conflict. So I read these and I realized, number one, this is why I never seemed to date anyone longer till I was age 29 and got married for the first time, date anybody longer than 3 months, because I never was interested past the perfect season. You know, when I started seeing their defects, you know how you, next. And so it was like, this makes total sense to me, you know, why I did or did not do things. Because I would be in awe of people who like dated someone for over a year. I didn't know how, and you still like them. I mean, you still want to be with them. And it just baffled me how you did that. So I dated 3 more people, and I also put some guidelines in place for myself. I don't call them rules, but I learned from step 2, one of the things we often refer to step 2 as is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results as part of that insanity to sanity. And so I looked at that. Okay, if you don't like the results you seem to keep getting, you're going to have to do different actions. And so what would those look like? Well, for myself, I decided that my first number 1 guideline was I don't kiss anybody for the first 30 days. Now that, when I share that with a sponsee, usually is met with oh. I mean, it's unimaginable to go past 30 minutes. So I said, look, this was my guideline for me. The point for you might be just go longer than you ever have. Try that. Because once you begin that connection, that physical, I don't know about yours, my mind goes into fantasy, and he's got potential. Disregard the red flags, he's got potential. He's gonna. And so this way I could even see, do I even like you? Do I? Because I did not value what I had to offer, okay, as a whole person. I did not value that, and just, 0 to 60 in a weekend, right? And I didn't like the results of that. And I am responsible for my actions. So by putting this in place, did 2 things, or 3 things really. One is that it's an integrity determination key. Okay, it's a character builder. Number 1, if I happen to say that, then 29 days is not 30. Okay? It meant that I either held up my integrity or I didn't. That if I said, well, it's a special occasion, for Christ's sake, tomorrow's 30, then why would they believe anything else I said had value or meaning? Well, she kind of fudged on 30, it was 29, maybe it'll be. No, see, I determine and display my character based on what I say. The other thing I got was if that person tried to maneuver or manipulate or guilt me or anything like that, to me that felt very disrespectful of what I said. Now, I also am responsible for my behavior. To me, I'm responsible to not do all the sexual double entendre stuff and pretend like I'm a school marm, and yet I'm putting out a very different message. I feel I have a responsibility to act like a woman with some integrity, not with mixed messages. So there's a lot of things that went into making a statement like that. And as a result of that, the first 4 people I kind of tried this on, it wasn't like they were the guy, but what they were is my example of developing more character, developing more self-worth about myself, and knowing that I am not willing to settle. And when I did not know, my girlfriend Ann told me, the last person I dated before Kent, she said, you said on the last one, no more potential, that it has to be in place. Everything needs to be in place. And so before I even met Kent, the last couple of years, and there would be plenty of times where I would go long spaces without dating anybody because I wasn't willing to, well, they asked, might as well. No, I'd rather be hanging out with my cats and dogs and watching some good movies, sometimes. And that's a signal. When you get to that point when you're dating somebody, you'd rather be with your cats and dogs. Probably a message there. And so the last couple years before I met Kent, I had this imaginary wish list box for God. And in my mind, I'd get to feel maybe self-pity or depressed or lonely or something like that. It didn't come often, but when it did, I'd get these imaginations going, gee, I'd like him to be this or that. And I kind of toss that in there. And I would just it got to the point, because nobody's going to fill this bill. You can just get really exaggerant on this. You can just let it rip. And what is so bizarre is that, oddly, there was no way that this could come true, but I would get these thoughts. And the last 2 things I threw in this imaginary wish list box was, I think it'd be kind of cool if he was like a doctor or something like that. I mean, not an ER doctor, but like a daytime doctor. And Kent's a dentist. See?
Not a real doctor.
and the other thing, and believe me, I do not exactly know where this came from, maybe because I had been divorced. The other thing was, and this was probably about a month before I would meet Kent, the last thing I threw in there is, I really like him to be a widower. Now that's kind of an odd statement, but it was the prior relationship's been concluded, and he stayed to the end. And that's when I would, in my story, because there's 2 stories, in my story, I would meet Kent Easter weekend of 2000. And now I'll turn it over to him.
But if you go to the library and you look for her story, it's not there. But his story is. I can tell you one thing in general terms, that if Debbie and I did not have a program called Alcoholics Anonymous, we were truly not prepared to have a relationship. If it wasn't for the program of Alcoholics Anonymous in each of our lives serving the purpose that it did for each one of us, there is no conceivable way that the 2 of us could spend more than about 5 minutes together. I was born in the Bay Area, raised here. My family was huge. It was a matriarchal family. I had, the 2 kids and 2.5 dogs or whatever it was, and we had aunts and uncles and nieces and nephews and second cousins, and so my life grew up part of a huge family-oriented life. One of the things that's characteristic about both our stories is that neither of us had a recognizable history of alcoholism in our family. It might be somewhere, but not particularly recognizable. And so for me, I ended up, my dad wanted me to go to college. He really wanted me to get a degree. An MD degree would have been fine, but it would have been a Master of Delusion but anyway, I did. So I take off for college, and I don't know what happened, but all of a sudden it was like the doors were open. I started drinking when I was 13, kind of, but when I went to college, it was like, oh, look out. I pledged to the drinking fraternity, and they wouldn't let me in for some pretty serious drinking problems. I was kicked out of several colleges. I still have some of those letters that say, please don't send your son back because blah, blah, blah. Or next time he gets drunk, he shows up drunk in the cafeteria, we're going to have to, expel him. So, but I have no idea that I have a problem called alcoholism. In fact, in my mind, I'm a party kind of guy, and all I'm out for, my dad wants me to get a degree, and I'm going to take advantage of that. And I did. It was like, I actually went back and recounted just the other day, 8 colleges and universities, 14 years, and 3 degrees. So all I did was to party and flunk out, and then promise my dad I'd do better and I'd go to the next college and get involved. Partying to me, because I was a product of the 60s, is sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Not necessarily in that order, but pretty close. It's just, I thought of myself as a champion of women's rights. This is talking about the delusion. But I did what she did sober. I did, drinking. I was just a pig, and I was truly a definition of a womanizer. So I have no clue how to treat women right. I use them, and a 3-month relationship. 3 days is long enough, really. So we had that in common. So you can just imagine us without a program coming together. It just would not work. And so I got married one time in college and another time shortly after college, and had a couple kids, and started my own business, and some bad luck and insensitive people, circumstances that are beyond my control. But I had some bad things start happening to me. I came home one weekend, and there was a sign on the front door of my house that says, "I'll contact you in 3 days." It was signed by my wife at the time, and I'm thinking, what the hell is this all about? And I go inside, and that house is half empty. And I'm wondering, well, what did I do? Master of delusion. I have not got a clue what's going on in my life. I think of myself like cutting edge of modern thought. Yeah, but when you're peeing in the closet, people don't think of that as this. So here I am. I got a couple of divorces now and a couple of kids, and I got my own business, but wasn't too long after that divorce that I got another note, and it said you're going to be, your lease is up, you have to be out in 30 days. And we'll see, when they moved me out of the house because I didn't pay the rent, they obviously moved into my office. And when they evicted me from the office, I obviously moved in my car. And I parked my car on the back parking lot, way out in the sticks where it wasn't paved at the time. And it's like they left the bathrooms open, so I thought we just had this kind of negotiated agreement that I could stay there and use the bathrooms. But one day I came back and I'm walking around the corner of that church, back to what I called my mobile home. It hadn't been mobile in a long time, but it had a mattress in the back of a 1977 or 76 Mercury Marquis station wagon, and so that was my home. Anyway, I go around the corner and they towed my car away, and I hope there's a couple other people in here who know what that definition. When you are looking for a bush to live under, you kind of get this idea that something's not working. I mean, you still think of yourself as a genius. It's not funny. I mean, and you learn things like, if you sleep on that side of the building, I don't care if you're under a bush or not, it's colder than when you're on this side of the building. So you learn those kind of, important parts of life that I never had to learn before. And so a friend of mine who had gotten sober in Alcoholics Anonymous before me, we were actually friends for 40 years, 20 years drinking together and 20 years sober together. He was the dean of my dental school, and he came out and found me and took me into his house. And so I connect my computer up to the internet and found a chat site where you could, meet people all over the country. And I met a gal, she was in New Orleans, and from that distance, I looked pretty good, actually. She asked me what I did for a living, and I explained that, I've been out of work for about 3 years now. In between jobs is what I told her. But so she said, well, go back to work. And for me to go back to work, I had to get permission from the state. And it was a dance like this. There were 17 people up there, and I was standing down there, and they were trying to get me to admit that I had a problem with alcohol, and I had just filled out all their paperwork and answered all those questions, and I said, bankruptcy and child custody and divorce and all that. I mean, if you had those kind of problems, your solution is drinking. It's not like my problem, it's my solution. And the guy is trying to explain to me, no, we want you to admit you got a problem with alcohol. I'm just thinking, God, those guys are so stupid. When you're on the cutting edge of modern thought, you know these things. Anyway, so I go to my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I walk in, and I've done a lot of bad things. I used to call it a 24-hour chemical distribution company. I think they also call it possession with intent, but so I have not really done a lot of good things. And when I walked into that meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I sat in the very back row and felt like it was the first thing decent I had done in a long, long time. So I married that woman from New Orleans, by the way. It was not my idea, it was her idea. Thank God it was her idea, because it wouldn't have been my idea, because I told her I was allergic to marriage. I'd already tried it twice, but somehow or other God knew better, put me with that person, and I show up at Alcoholics Anonymous, a broken man. I knew one thing, and Billy said it, I knew one and only one thing, that if I continue doing my life the way I've been doing it, it's not going to work. Now, I didn't know I was alcoholic, but I just knew Kent's way is not going to work. And I'm totally convinced of that, so I better find another way of doing it. Well, I'm now in AA, and I got a new marriage, and I have no clue as to what to do with life and living. Thank God, he put me. Thank God there is a God, because if there was no God, there'd be no hope for a guy like Kent, I'll tell you. And he has. He's taken care of idiots like me, and I believe that. I believe that there's that I don't have to understand. I don't have to be brilliant. I don't have to be perfect. I just have to be able to know that there is a God, and I found that God in Alcoholics Anonymous. When I got here, I hated anything to do with religion or God or spirituality or any of that, So thankfully, they allowed me to show up in a meeting the way I was, and I spent 12 years listening to what a sponsor would suggest, and actually doing some of it some of the time. Not so much in the beginning, but after a while, I ended up realizing that the more I did that someone else suggested, whether it was my wife at the time or my sponsor, my life continued to get better. So the steps were, I'm crazy, you can tell, crazy, arrogant, know-it-all, hard-headed. I had a problem with authority, and no one's going to tell me, and blah, blah, blah. That until you get that somehow convinced deep down inside of you that, like, you better come up with another way, you're not going to listen. And so you get this, to me, when I took the steps and I came in here in that selfish, self-centered, self-seeking, consumed, and thank God there were the steps that brought me to that awareness. I can remember saying to John Bird, he was my best friend, I said, it's supposed to identify my defects of character. I can't even think of any. What would you suggest? And he just goes, selfishness. I'm thinking, I'm not selfish. Anyway, so delusion, master of delusion. Anyway, I take the steps enough to become aware. I can remember in my 4th step, my sponsor kept saying, well, what was your part? What was your part? Or, where were you to blame? And I'm trying to say, I was falsely accused. I've got all these degrees. You don't even have a high school diploma. I didn't say that. I thought that, actually. Until finally there was one day, it was like, oh my God, I heard somebody telling their story, and it's like, oh, I can understand, maybe the pain that I'm experiencing is a result of my own behavior. I wasn't falsely accused. I had been unfaithful to that wife, and so she turned that around and made it possible for me to realize, So I believe the steps transformed me from being selfish and self-centered to having some awareness that there is a power greater than myself, even if it's that wife or the program or a sponsor, until I feel that unless I had gotten through the steps, there's no way that I could have had a relationship with Debbie. So thank you.
Thanks, Kent. So we're not going to talk about all of the traditions or all of the concepts, so we're going to highlight a few of them in particular. When I got sober, my first group was a 12-step and 12 tradition study. And those long-timers were real clear to me about, and when I asked them, what do you do to stay sober? They were clear that when they talked to me about the traditions, they said they're not just for the group. I mean, you're a member of a group and you need to understand those traditions to apply them and be an informed group member. But why don't you also try to apply them in your personal life? And throughout the years, these have been the best tools I know in how to be in a relationship is the 12 traditions, whether it's with Kent or my group or family members or at work or at the world at large. And so I want to touch just a little bit myself on tradition 1 and 5. As I mentioned, selfishness and self-centeredness were certainly, my DNA and still are today. But you have shown me that the common welfare of the marriage comes first, that my welfare follows afterwards. But part of that is that the danger I can take that with is what I have seen some folks do is one of two things. The extremist, the relationship is in trouble, whatever they might call trouble. They're afraid they're going to leave them. They're afraid they're not going to get them, whatever it's going to be. And so they decide I'm going to focus on my relationship to the exclusion of everything else. And they get rid of sponsees because they're in the way. They scale back meetings. Service takes up time away from the relationship. And I'll tell you that when I have seen that, or when people have told me that's what they're going to do, my heart breaks. Because I know that's about probably the worst thing they could do. Because when I am practicing the 5th tradition, that I've got one primary purpose, and that is to carry the message that I will be a better member of that union, that I will be, because if I'm focusing just on this marriage, I will see every dimple and crinkle and defect he's got. And this way, I'm looking at the beauty of the forest instead of the ugliness of some of the trees. And so it's important to find, and I don't like this word balance because I'd rather be a little out of balance in AA, but to find that service medium, if you will. And the other thing I've seen is that there's such a focus on in ignoring the common welfare of that marriage or whatever that the relationship might be, and there's the extreme where they're in constant meetings. And I remember that I sponsored this gal, and she had been sober a number of years, drank again, was back. And in her first year, she was in meetings every day. She had 4 young children at home, a husband, and her sponsor at the time moved away and asked me to be her sponsor. And I said, there's a couple things I'm going to ask you to do, and one of them is, I've never asked anybody to do this, but you need to cut back to 5 meetings a week or something because you have 4 children at home that need your participation. You can't run away from that responsibility with the excuse of going to meetings, being in service, because part of these 12 steps is to incorporate us back into life, but then not exclude that, because I got the good life again. I've got the great life going on, whatever your great life might be. So the union of 1 and 5 makes me a better member of this marriage, and always remembering what my primary purpose is. And being and staying married is just the side benefit of that.
So she had mentioned the 30 days.
He didn't know about those.
Well, I found out. We get on top of Signal Hill after she's driving me around, and I'm thinking to myself, she's kind of cute, and if she ever quits talking, I'm going to try and kiss her. And we get out of the car, and she walks toward me, and I walk toward her, and I take her in my arms, and she goes like this. And I'm thinking Southwest flies out of here every 30 minutes, get me to the airport. God has a funny sense of humor because I'm obviously turned off, ready to go. I've been rejected. My feelings are hurt. I'm gonna, and yet, soon after that happened, she's got a schedule, by the way, and we're going to follow the schedule. We go to the aquarium, and she's about 10 feet in front of me, leaning over, looking at the lower aquarium, and I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, I'm in trouble here. And she turns around and she says, what did you say? I said, I didn't say that out loud. She said, well, you must have had your brain on speakerphone. I don't know what else you call that, but the hand of God played a role in our life. And it was clear that God did for us what we couldn't have done for ourselves. Before the week was over, she had her own experience of a similar nature. So when it talks in tradition too, that our loving God, as he may express himself in our relationship, it has as much to do with, are we fulfilling his purpose by coming together? Does our coming together actually make it possible for her to be more her and for me to be more me? And I think when I look at, well, if we had gotten together before I had taken the steps, and I'm selfish, self-centered, I want nothing more than, well, more sex would be fine. Other than that, I don't care. But when I get through the steps and I'm thinking, oh, I really want to contribute to her life, and what can I do to add to her life in particular, if I could somehow, at the end of my day, time with my wife, to be able to think that what I did was please God in my behavior, what we did together, what we accomplished, what we fulfilled in each other's lives, was a fulfillment of what God would like us to do. So in that sense, like, I believe that a relationship isn't the mechanics of you do this, you do this, you do this, and that relationship will work out. I truly believe that some relationships, like my former ones, there's not enough therapy or money or counseling or training on how to treat a woman or any of that is ever going to fulfill the void that is there, that you are not supposed to be together. I believe that God wanted me to be with her. Before the 30 days were up, she had gotten a ring. I hadn't yet gotten a kiss. I don't know what to say about that.
That's how that works. Okay. So
Let me explain the ring.
let's see. Here we go. That's another story. Okay, so another part of tradition too is about group conscience. And over the years of our being together, it's important to discuss, Nancy mentioned it earlier in the concepts about discussing big things. And part of that is the respect in that group conscience, or maybe you could even call it the minority opinion, depending upon who's primary thinking the situation. If it's my idea, then he has the minority opinion. That's kind of how that looks. And so...
And if it's a group conscience, it's her opinion.
So when I arrived with Kent, I had 4 pets, 2 cats, 2 dogs. So that automatically set the limit that I have a 4-pet limit.
Yep.
Okay, if I'd have come with maybe more, we'd have had a higher number. I don't know, but I came with 4, so we got a 4-pet limit. And we've varied over the years and we got down to 1 pet, and then we built it back up, and so we're now back at 4 pets, and I love cats. Oh my God. So I look in the paper and see what little cats and dogs need a home and everything, and I know that I got a 4-pet limit, but there was this one paper, and so we currently have an all-black cat and a black and white tuxedo. And I'm looking at these pictures, and they look like identical to what we currently have. One is named Coco, the other is Chanel. And I'm like, this is an omen. I mean, this is so meant to be. What better home than our home could these little ones come to? They need to come together because they're a matched pair. I mean, they're named pair. And so I'm thinking, how can let's see. So Kent, I was looking in the paper and I saw there's these 2 cats. No. I haven't even finished the statement. But really, so there's these 2 cats, they look just like the ones we have. I mean, it's amazing. No. How about if we foster them? How about if we do that? Oh, no, I can see this right now. About 2 years from now, we got 85 cats in here. We only own 4. We're fostering. I keep forgetting to get a home for them. We got 85 cats in here, and I'm thinking, he really knows me so well. It's just kind of scary. So I just thought, well, the group conscience has spoken. But when he walked away, I'm thinking, they're identical to what we have. I wonder if he'd even notice. But I respected the group conscience.
Are we quitting?
Okay, I tell you what we're going to do. We're going to take a 10-minute break right now. So do your quick thing, and we'll come back for the second half of this amazing workshop.
Welcome back. I had talked about the effect that having a sponsor on my life, and one of the things when I was married to Skeeter, where it was probably a reasonable explanation of the autonomy of how you can be so active in Alcoholics Anonymous and figure out a way to maintain a marriage. Skeeter was not a real fan of me going to Alcoholics Anonymous. She would much rather that I spent the time with her, all the time with her. In fact, she would say things like, "You love them more than you love me. If you'd love me, you'd spend as much time as you do in meetings." And it wasn't up until the very last meeting, just before she passed, that she actually admitted that it was nice that she said, "I can see why you need those meetings." She had died of cancer in 1999, and that's how I became the widower. But there was an occasion where we had started a conference in Concord, California, some years ago. It was a one-shot conference, and I had worked on getting that put together, and it was that day. It was over at the Crown Plaza, actually, and it was the day of the conference, and I was heading over to the conference, and I am on the cell phone to Skeeter, and I pull up and get out of my car, and I'm talking to her, and she's saying, "What are you doing?" I said, "It's the conference weekend." She said, "Well, you're not going to spend the weekend at the conference, are you?" And I'm just thinking, oh my God. I mean, that's what we've been planning for. I mean, there's this total disconnect. She's thinking you're on a conference committee, but you're not going to actually be spending the whole weekend at the conference. And so I'm just like baffled. And so I'm so angry, so upset, so hurt. so disappointed that she isn't doing it my way. I call up Glenn and I said, she doesn't want me to spend the time at the conference, and like, I don't know what to do. And he said, well, maybe you're going to have to figure out what it is you need to do to stay sober, and then do that. Well, you know, being as brilliant as I am, I interpreted that really to mean that I'd go back to the house and I'd say to her, look, I'm doing these meetings, I have these service commitments, I've got this kind of time that I was occupied. How much of the rest of with AA, how much of the rest of the week do you want? She said, I'll take it all. I really hadn't, that meant I didn't have any time to myself, you know. And it was like, oh, okay. But we had then a negotiated agreement based on the recommendation of a sponsor, and which really meant that, oh, I've been invited to chair a meeting on Thursday night. Her response would be, which meeting are you going to give up? And then it was like, well, I've been offered the opportunity to make myself available for this service commitment. She said, well, which one are you going to give up? And we had a negotiated agreement from that point on. So the point was that my marriage got better because of a program called Alcoholics Anonymous. And thank you.
You're moving into step 7. Yeah, right there.
Follow the script. She wanted me to tell this one. So, you know, she's the organized, she's the detail, I'm the big picture, I'm the idealist, you know, she's the pragmatic. I mean, it's pretty clear that there's a division of labor. She gives the orders and I follow. I think that's a division.
They're guidelines.
They don't always feel like that. So we have this agreement that we were going to do quarterly getaways and weekly date nights. And so she's the organized one. Let her get it on the calendar and figure it out and resolve all the details. And well, this is like 16 years later, and things aren't going my way. I mean, we still have the statement that we do quarterly getaways, and we put that on the calendar before the end of the year. That's what goes on the calendar for the next year, and then we put commitments around that. So we've got that in place. But something happened to that weekly date night. It was supposed to get moved around according to, but it, you know, moved around didn't mean like next year. But it seems like the weekly date night has not been quite weekly. And so being like, you know, so brilliant and a quick thinker, I came up with a solution that if I was going to be totally self-supporting and take responsibility for my part in this marriage, maybe I should plan the weekly date nights. It's a good idea. We'll see how it works. Actually, I have done it once so far.
And I've spoken to lots of sponsees and gals that will say to me, and by the way, I really, really, really appreciated his planning the date night, and that we didn't just kind of decide at the last minute. We put it on the calendar. We got this available to us, and he took that initiation, which I really appreciated. We did things I love to do, which is go to the movies and get all dressed up. And I just had to know at what level of dress up to go. And beautiful flowers at the table awaiting us, and the sunset view of the three bridges. I mean, I really appreciated that very much. It made me feel very special after 16 plus years of marriage. That's, I think, part of how you keep it fun and respectful and enjoyable with each other. But I also know that at times in the past, I've had to take a look at, have I discouraged that? Because, for example, I'll have a sponsee say, they never plan anything for date night. They never take the initiation, blah, blah, blah. I always have to do it. So my question to them is, well, did they do that early in the marriage? Or maybe not. Sometimes they did and that kind of faded. Sometimes they never did. And part of the question is, do I discourage that from happening? Because maybe I'll say, so where do you want to go to dinner? And he'll say, a restaurant. And
I actually said, how about P.F. Chang's? No, the parking is too bad. And then I suggested, whatever it was, no, the lines are too long there. Then.
Yeah. So as you can tell, I would have the reasons why not. And often I've heard, well, where do you want to go? Well, I don't care. Where do you want to go? Well, I don't know. No. And so have I discouraged that initiation? And so my goal in the last couple of years is to just say, when he says something, to say yes. When he makes even though I already know going in I'm not going to like it, I might think that, I don't want to try that. My answer, or I know it's going to be terrible parking and long lines, I still say, that sounds great. Even when it's going to Casper's hot dog place, which is his favorite. So I will...
We celebrated my 60th birthday in the parking lot of Casper's, my favorite restaurant. She put it on.
I organized it. Okay. So moving on to another tradition, 10, outside issues. So there's lots of those. In our life, with the world at large, probably my favorite story about that is some years ago, I had been asked to do a workshop for a women's retreat, traditions in our relationship. And it sounded like it was singular, so I'm like, we're about a couple, 3 years married at the time, and I said, I really feel that we apply the traditions, but I don't always have the articulation to put that in. So on the 4-hour drive from Yosemite, we're kind of going through one by one by one. And we get to 10. Outside issues. And it was like he was waiting for this one. And like glass, what came out was that you, meaning me, you have to consider your husband's defects of character as an outside issue and therefore have no opinion on them. But I'm here, I'm here to help, right? How will he know about these defects if I don't help him, And I swear to God, it was like I had a straitjacket pulled on me. I talk with my hands a lot, but it was like, whoa, why would I? But the longer I thought about that, I thought how wise that really was. In that, why is it that in a nanosecond, I can put that defect under the microscope. Doing it right, doing it good's the default. That's expected. But you dip below that line and bzz, I've got it on radar, it's microscoped, it's enlarged. And the more I practice that, his defects of character are an outside issue, the more comfortable our relationship is, and he's much better at it than I am. Well, I was sharing this at a conference a few years ago, and I said the way I see it is like Kent's got a couple of really big ones, and I have a bunch of little ones. And the way I saw that is if you stacked on mine, okay, then it would be even, okay? That's how I saw that. So, no, I'm not done yet.
I want to tell this part.
So a couple days later, he says, we're on our way to a meeting, and he says, you remember the other day when you said, like, I got a couple large ones and you got a bunch of small ones? I said, yeah. Have you ever heard about the disease of perception? And after I paused, I started laughing, and I'm like, well, you're saying like I have a couple big ones and you have a bunch of little ones? He said, well, like I say, the disease of perception, you know? He's got a couple big ones and I got a bunch of little ones, because that's my story, and that's what I'm sticking to, as they say. So then we have politics. Now, we're not going to go obviously into politics here. No need to make any comments on that. But my mother came to live with us. She's a regular person. She doesn't have traditions that she needs to live by. And so she's getting ready to move out here with us. I go back, gather her rest of her things up. And this is May, so we're still in all the general election conversations. And so we have different opinions. That's fine. But after about a week of her criticism and kind of severe bashing of a candidate, I said, Mom, I respect that you and I have different opinions on this. And I'm not here to ask you to have a different opinion or look at mine. But what I would like to ask is that the person that you're really bashing, I happen to like. And if you could just dial that back a little bit. So I'm not asking her to change anything, but that's kind of what was fine with her. So with now another person in her life that has a different opinion from her, so she dialed that way back. And I appreciated that. And I didn't have to respond to any comments or anything that she said. So now she moves out here with us. And it's a couple of months later now. It's like July-ish. And one of Kent's sponsees came over. And he's waiting for Kent. And she comes over to have a little conversation. And she says, so who are you voting for? I said to the sponsee, do not answer that. I said, Mom, this is a politic-free house. We don't talk politics here. You can talk to them with your girlfriend in your bedroom, but in the common areas, this is political-free. And I could tell the sponsee was like, whew, you know, what's the right answer? It's her mother, blah, 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 right? You know, what do I say? And we've had to do that one more time. But it's not about me changing her or her opinion on stuff, but it's to create that common welfare one more time about a subject that can have very, very impactful situations amongst family or friends or whatever. So this is how we've also applied that here in our personal life. And then the last thing I'm going to just open up about here is so Kent has twin daughters. They're 42, and they each have one child, a daughter. Now, our relationship with them has been kind of active and inactive. When it's been inactive, it's been their choice, reasons we don't know about, but we have always been there and open and welcoming and inviting to have them be a part of our life. We got a call at the end of December,
5 days before Christmas.
5 days before Christmas, that one of the girls who had a daughter who was 2 years and 10 months at the time had just been taken by CPS, and they're looking for family members as the placement, and would we be willing to take her? Okay, so he thankfully, he asked a bunch of questions, said I need to talk to Debbie about that. And now, so he had twin daughters, I've had no children. There was a reason I had no children, okay? I was a cat in another life, all right? They're just, they take away from me, okay? I know the depth of my self-involvement. I don't want to give that much time to another little person. This is a huge, huge question. It's, what is the right thing to do? And for the next month, we really did a lot of prayer and meditation. This was not a quick decision, a yes or a no. We talked a lot about this. What would this look like? I don't want to say disruption like a negative thing, but it would absolutely drastically change the trajectory of our life. And are we ready for this? I got my 80-year-old mother, and Kent and I are not spring chickens, and then maybe a 3-year-old. Whoa, what does that look like, right? And it was the kind of thing of really, what is the right thing to do here? And so we decided to go ahead and put our hat in the ring, because service is how we live. We've never even met this granddaughter, and she lived within 45 minutes of us. So we decide to go through the process, and there's all kinds of things, but it really was one of those things where I don't know what the outcome is going to be, and we know that that's not part of what I have any control over anyway, but I really knew inside that we will be led to the right conclusion.
Let me just interject, because a few weeks after this has been presented to us, Debbie actually says, this may be an opportunity that God has provided us. And I'm thinking, sure, it looks like that is a realistic possibility. A few weeks go by, and I turned to Debbie and I said, so what's your take on this? It's not your daughter or granddaughter, it's mine. And I already know that she's not interested in having children. It's been kind of a big part of our relationship up until now. And she just turns to me and she says, well, we do live a life of service. We don't always get to choose where we serve. And I thought, pretty decent. So let me just take it a little further, because now this is months into this process, and if indeed that second tradition is that we are to fulfill God's purpose while we're here, that I'm supposed to be able to enhance Debbie's ability to fulfill her purpose, and she's to do that to mine. And we've been presented with this opportunity. Well, where are we going to go with this? And I'll have to tell you, Debbie and I use different words. My description is, we then had a spiritual fight. Debbie describes, no, don't say that. Of course, because that's not the right way to, but her description is it was a spiritual collaboration. And what we are doing now, we have sat down, we have removed our egos to the extent possible, and we are now arguing what God wants us to do. Are we supposed to be doing what we're doing today? Or should we put that on hold? Because we know from the experience that we have with his granddaughter, we can do this granddaughter. We really could be an effective force. We could do that. But like she said, there are some circumstances. Yeah, I'm 75. I'll be 90 when she's graduating from high school. No, come on. So let's be realistic. And so it's like, what is your purpose? What is my purpose? What are we in this world to do? And we had that collaboration. It's like, well, what does God want us to do?
We're having that very deep, heartfelt discussion the day before we're to meet with the social worker and her supervisor regarding the future. Which we totally understand, it's about the welfare of the child. The principle is the welfare of the child. We're the personality. And we have to let them know basically tomorrow whether or not we're going to be the person who then takes it into adoption, if that's the case, because they only want one movement, not us and then to the adoptive family. And we know that, and it's really heartbreaking to know that you can't be all to all. It's heartbreaking to think, should I set everything aside to give that focus? Or do I trust in the major process that the right thing will happen and we get to stay grandparents and that continue to do what appears that we're supposed to be doing, what we've been doing all along? And all those preparation things were absolutely fabulous education things to me. And so we went in there and we knew that as heartbreaking as it was, the right thing to do was let someone else become that permanent placement moving into adoption. And as it would turn out, when we let that go and they really appreciated the fact that we knew that was a reality and that they could then start the next process, what would end up happening that we would not know for about 2 months, we would find out that her twin sister would learn about the situation and step in and is now the permanent family that will eventually move into adoption. And it couldn't have been a better mother than her twin sister. And so while we did our part, or our participation, by getting out of the way and continuing on the path that we knew was right for us, again, we looked at as placing those spiritual principles before our personality of look at how wonderful we are, we're going to be the best grandparents or whatever. We're going to be the best that we're able to be in what we're allowed to do. But it wasn't an easy, it had to come together on that collaboration of that decision.
The experience that we had that night before we met with Aisha, I would wish on anybody to be able to have a program to the point where I'm not arguing in favor of my grandchild against someone who really has never had an interest in, no, we had none of that going on. It's like we were really truly focused on what does God want us to do here? She was the one that brought it up. Is this what God wants? And so you can see from the result of having steps, traditions, concepts, a real program in place in our lives that we can resort to a spiritual place to make a decision that is so difficult to make. It came down to, are you going to be honest or dishonest? And it's like, let's just be honest. And we went in there and was honest, and we had no clue what the eventual outcome would be. We could have easily tried to force what we thought we should do or should be, but this turned out the result of God's handiwork, using us in the way that we can be used. Thanks.
So that is our talk on sharing about using some of the traditions in our life. Now we're going to move into some of the concepts. Right of decision. This is a good... Did you want to say something?
No, go right ahead.
So it's now time for me to get another car. Car is going to start needing some repair work, and we're kind of at this dilemma. Now, I'm not somebody who goes through cars every year, and I don't need a new car. Just pretty much something to get me around town is good. But now it's time to get a new car. So we're sitting there talking about, well, what would you like to get? And I wasn't really sure, thinking about a few things. And he said, well, as long as it's not more than a Tesla. Okay. All right. Now,
I wanted a Tesla.
yeah, it's because he wanted a Tesla. And he'd already seen one that was red that he thought I should check out. And because he knows I love red. So I thought, well, that just changed the game. And so all of a sudden I went from bing to boom. So I said, well, then I want a blah, blah. He says, oh, really? Okay. So we start talking to some folks, and I shift gears a little bit. And he said, well, what I want you to do is I want you to drive whatever you think you would like to be driving, and then you make your decision. And the point was that in right of decision, it was going to be my car to drive, not his car to drive. And that it was important that I got something that I would enjoy, that I would like, and I did. I got the car that I like. So, and it's not a Tesla. Okay. Yeah, okay. There you go.
So I get to drive a Prius. Kind of balances it out. I'm embarrassed to be in her car. When she said, "How about a Bentley?" and I pulled up this, it was a gold Bentley, and I on the screen, and I said, "Doesn't that look a little bit ostentatious?" And she goes, "No." Right of participation. So there was I was sponsored by Tom Ivester, and I would chase Tom around several times, half a dozen times a year. And I was always supposed to call him on Monday morning, and sometimes he was there and sometimes he wasn't, and I got to talk to Fern. And so after a while, we were together quite a number of years, and I probably talked to Fern as much as I talked to Tom, and I got to find out what she was about. And what Fern was about was that he was gone all the time. And I got thinking, well, that's what Skeeter said, I'm gone all the time. And Fern says, if he just loved me as much as he loved those drunks. And so she did her very best to get him to stay home. There were once a month, or he couldn't go he could go every weekend but one a month. He couldn't go on Thursday and come back on Tuesday, and so on. So I have great familiarity with what it's like to be in a relationship with somebody who's on the road a lot, because I have talked to Fern just for years, and I know that it's not a happy kind of way. So I've heard how she's dealt with it or tried to deal with it, and the control that she's tried to put in place. And so I thought, well, I happen to be married to someone who gets invited to talk here and there, and I made the suggestion that that she let me know when she was invited to go out of town. And I thought I was kind of nice, kind. I wasn't demanding, I just thought it'd be nice. It would have been nice if she had taken that suggestion. But I did have the right to participate. So a few months go by and I kind of reiterate that, and obviously it fell on deaf ears. And so we are actually now some years past my original suggestion. And so I still ask her, where are you going this weekend? Because I don't know. And so I made the suggestion just about a month ago. I said, you know, there might be some real spiritual value to when someone asks you to say, let me check my calendar and check with my husband. And she says, oh, I can see checking with a calendar, but I don't think I need to say check with my husband. And I'm thinking, I should never, as a husband, speak up at a time unless I'm right. Because if I speak up and say something that isn't appropriate and accepted by her, then all we have is she's going to dig in her heels and I'm going to dig in mine, and we're going to be fighting for this forever. So there's no point in taking a position unless, number one, you are absolutely 100% correct. And so my ability to negotiate means that I'm going to come up with the right time to say it, and the right place to say it, and the right way to say it. And so I'm not going to say something about what I believe would benefit her spiritually when I know, unless I know I'm right in what I'm saying. And so I have, explored that enough. But that doesn't mean that she's going to do it my way. It's just that I have the right to participate. I don't have the right to control. I wish I did. Especially in this case. But we haven't got there yet. But I haven't given up hope.
I go through phases of when I'm invited places to, let me get back with you. Because checking with my husband always sounds like I'm getting permission. And not that he's ever said, no, I'd like you to stay home or anything like that. But it is, on my part, it's a respect thing. And that is something of my defects that I want to improve more on. So I'm participating too.
It's a process.
It's a process. Spiritual progress.
So a couple of years ago, my mother-in-law was aging, and my wife had mentioned that she wanted to come out and visit, and after being here, her mother thought it would be better than Sioux Falls, South Dakota in the winter, and wanted to know if it would be possible for her to move out to California. And so Debbie asks me how I felt about that. And I said, not a bad idea. I mean, yeah, sure. Well, I didn't comprehend the full So when she gets out and we have a guest room for her to stay in, she is panting every time she goes up the stairs and makes it very clear that this is a very arduous task and that she cannot really continue to get up these stairs. And we live in a 2-story. And I'm thinking, no problem. You know those chair elevators? And I suggest that to Debbie. This is my minority opinion. Debbie says, now I know Debbie didn't say it this way because she never would say it this way, but this is always the way I hear it. No, that's not going to work. But it's so conclusive. It's not like there's room to argue or debate or even rebut. You know, it's like, oh, well, that's off the table. Well, and I'm thinking, outside elevator. Just, you know, you can just put one on the, couple thousand, $5,000, no problem. And Debbie, when I present that to Debbie, she says, are you kidding? Look, I've already got it figured out. We're going to move this wall out 8 feet, and when we do, there'll be enough room downstairs. We can have a bedroom for your mother, we can have a bathroom, and we can keep you can tell what the minority opinion is, right? We now have a large remodel going on. We are moved out of our house for at least 6 months. And I'm glad that I said, sure. Have your mother come out.
It's going to be so nice when it's done. With concept 10, about, sort of mentioned earlier, defining roles and responsibilities, Nancy touched on that a little bit as well. You know, Kent and I really are complements to each other. He's a big picture guy, and he's got vision and dreams, and he looked at this conference and had ideas about it, but he doesn't have the ability to put it together. So then there's the people like me who are the detail grunt workers. And because when he presents an idea like that, my thing is, no, that's just, no. I am the naysayer oftentimes because it looks like a lot of work to me as part of it. But I'm the detail man, and I have the ability to formalize and be methodical and systematic, and that's just part of my DNA. And we also know that you know, those strengths and weaknesses, I'm real clear what his strengths are my weaknesses, and vice versa. And that's why I think a lot of times we work very well together. And I know there's not a lot of people that could handle me, and I know there's not a lot of people that could handle Kent. And so it works out really good, especially when he has the last word.
So I was given a T-shirt. It says, you wouldn't understand. It's a Kent thing.
Yes. Okay, go on.
Concept 9. Concept 9 is really about leadership, and it was kind of fun when I first got together with Debbie and I asked her, do you have a favorite step? Oh, yeah. I said, really? Okay. Then I asked her what they were, and well, do you have a favorite tradition? Yeah, I have 2. Oh, really? Which are they? And it was like weird. It was like same as mine. And then I said, of course, you know, well, what's your favorite concept? And she said, Concept 9. And Concept 9 has such incredible, there's so much in the concepts as far as the ability to function in life. I mean, just the whole concept we know about minority opinion or right of appeal, that it really is the key ingredient to get people to pull out of them what it is that they have to offer, so that the decisions for Alcoholics Anonymous are the result of all of our contributions. I mean, that is the same thing, the collaborative effect of a marriage. I wanted to say or put out there, when I was first sober, I had to listen to a sponsor and do enough of what he said to be able to have new ways of doing life to be successful. I would have continued to be a failure. I also had to listen to a woman named Skeeter and listen to what she said and do as she suggested. She had that natural, God-given common sense on how to have a relationship. And a few of those things that we have talked about, one of those was that if you were around Kent when he was brand new sober, he was all of that arrogant, crazy, almost impossible for most people to deal with, yet Skeeter had no problem. What was it that she could do? She could do that tradition 10. She could overlook my defects. How she did that, I have no clue, really. I mean, it's a great principle, and when Debbie says that I do a better job of it than her, I'm not sure that that's true, because I think she puts up with my defects in a way just like she said. They're just an outside issue. So if I were to focus on her defects, like she said, and I'm only communicating with her to be helpful and help her understand and learn all those things, then every time we got together, she would be hearing me criticize or condemn or say something negative. And after a while, this is not a fun relationship. But if you're only looking at a person's defects all the time, that's all you're going to talk about. So by being able to just put them out of your mind, and that's not easy to do, it is possible then to have a relationship. Skeeter also did a couple of other things. One was she said that we're going shopping, and I'm thinking, oh great, what guy likes to go shopping? No, grocery shopping. Grocery shopping. Okay, you take that's half of the store, I'll take this half. No, we're going to walk every aisle together. What? Are you kidding? Well, what happened was you have this pseudo objective of going through the aisles and getting what you need, but you also have a certain amount of time where you're in public that you can bring up things in a way that you can't yell and scream in a grocery store so well, right? It's an amazing way to have a vehicle for communicating. She was the one that brought up the weekly date nights. I mean, we had to have a date night, and she made sure of that. Anyway, so concept 9, that whole thing, in there we'll talk about, there was a thing that in there, it actually, I want to quote that. It says, we shall be in continual need of these same attributes: tolerance, responsibility, flexibility, and vision. With Debbie, tolerance, responsibility, flexibility, and vision have contributed to our ability to have a relationship.
So it's easy to get married. You just say, I do, in front of somebody legally able to marry you. It's sort of like it's easy to, at some point, get sober, but how do you stay sober? How do you stay married? How do you stay enjoying it? Now, please understand, we're not coming here as some expert on relationships. We don't want to come off as some authority on it. What we've wanted to do here is share our experience and how through the steps and traditions and concepts, it has been the guidelines of an enjoyable relationship for over 16 years. And I know it really works well doing it like this, because when we were 2 years married, I'm like, I still like hanging out with this guy. I mean, that was shocking to me. That was like forever to me. I had never, ever had that. And what the 3 legacies have given me as tools in this is, first of all, is communication. I'll tell you the one word that is a conversation killer or a communication killer, and the gals I sponsor know this because I say it often. The word is talk. Whenever you present the opportunity to communicate with, can we talk? We need to talk. I've got to talk to you. We can talk about that later. Doomsday. That will kill it right there. Because what happens is the person hearing that information says, what I do, oh my God, and they start to get, and so I say, find any other word in our language to say things like, can I share something with you? Can I get your feedback on something? I'd like your opinion on something. Can I chat with you for a few minutes? Then you're coming to the table as equals and not somebody's in defense mode. It is a 4-letter word that really puts fear into us, and nobody wins because I'm not coming there as a equal, I'm coming there in defensiveness. So the other thing is, whenever I have started a question with why, that again puts the recipient on defense. I have to defend whatever I did or said. So what I've learned to say is, help me understand your thinking about that. The reason you chose to do that or say that. And an attitude and tone accompanied with the question is of vital importance. Because I don't know the reason they did that. And they don't have to defend it, but I'm just curious. Maybe it's something in their past. Maybe it's an experience that I don't know. Oh, okay, well, that I can understand now why you did that. So it opens up communication, good supportive communication. Getting eye contact before I speak. Key with guys, okay? So if I find two things that, first of all, if I open the conversation with Kent or Honey or whatever, I've got his attention and then I can communicate, but if I communicate and then say his name at the end, I have to repeat it. So start with the name. Hi, honey, can I have a couple minutes of your time? And he's often at the computer. And he says, sure. So I just wait. I do not begin speaking until I got eyeballs, okay? And so I'll be sharing whatever I need to share. And I can be in mid-sentence. I'm not done yet. And we'll be chatting, and all of a sudden, he just turns back to the computer and does something. I stop. I wait. He returns to me. I continue the conversation. This way I don't get all twisted up. I just know that that's a part of it. But if I'm talking and saying anything while he is out of my focus, then I might as well just forget about it. I could speak it in Greek. So this is part of the communication tools that have made it successful and how we can collaborate on this.
She's also made it very clear that I'm not supposed to say anything negative about her, so I'm not going to. I do want to say that when I was sponsored by Tom Ivester, and there came up the idea of studying the traditions, I said to Tom, but the traditions were written for the use of the groups in Alcoholics Anonymous. So I believe that what we should do is talk about the use of the traditions in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I have ultimate respect for Tom. And he said to me, like he often did in total contradiction to what I just said, he said, But most people can identify using the traditions in a personal experience first before they can understand how to use them in Alcoholics Anonymous. So our presentation here today hopefully isn't so much just so you can present, so you can apply traditions or concepts or steps in your own relationships. It really is that this is a way of life that works under all conditions. And that we hope that what we have done here is to infuse some interest in the other aspects of the program beyond the steps. So thank you.
So, you can, so with the, as we close up here today, I just want to certainly say thank you for the opportunity. Hope we've provided and shared some tools for your relationships that you might find useful. And one of the things we have found that I certainly find so, the result is that the appreciation for Kent, the respect for each other, and my favorite, lots of laughter is needed. Thank you very much. Thank you.